morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dragon's Breath Bow Wow, welcoming you back to another Archon's Auxiliaries. Well, a slight variation on it today. We're doing a full-on comparative review. Survival on the killing floor. Now, this is going to be, as I mentioned, a bit of a change on our regular Auxiliaries formula. I am a huge fan of Killing Floor 2. And admittedly, with the new game coming out, I am a little bit hyped and quite interested in playing Killing Floor 3 at some point. So I thought, as a one-off, why not give an opportunity to compare other universes to the KF2 universe? A little bit of background if you're not aware of Killing Floor. It is a loosely zombies-style game. It's not necessarily zombies, but we'll talk about that in a second. And it is a wave clear game, kind of a PvE contest game, intending for you to live the longest amount of time and clear out these genetic bioengineering monstrosities from various different maps. Now, we're going to be comparing a lot of different forces to different units within the Killing Floor, and through them we can determine who is best placed overall to really survive. Some background limitations first. The Killing Floor Zeds, zombies, are genetic and bioengineered monstrosities / super soldiers. Originally, they were created as a super soldier project by the company Orzine, or Horizon, or Horzine, depending on how you want to pronounce it. As mentioned, they are a mix of bioengineering, literal engineering with mechanical bits, and then genetic tampering. A lot of them are simply clones. The idea with this kind of engagement means that our Zed enemies are loosed into an area that was once, our various forces in squad strength are loosed into an area that was once a production lab or a factory for the Zeds, and they are now engaging these forces from other universes. So we're going to be going into several different groups and squads here. I'll number them specifically and go into detail as to why they will or will not do well against different types of Zeds. And then at the very end, when we go over bosses, I will go over and see which unit I think overall has the best chance of survival. We'll be focusing for these reasons, for the reasons of it being kind of a closed area and going by the game logic of surviving the Killing Floor. We'll be focusing on a couple of things. Survivability is the number one. How durable, how armored, how resilient our units are. The duration of deployment. How long are they going to last? That's kind of going to be determinate. How many waves are they likely to be able to survive? And lethality against specific enemy types. So that's one of the main things. We'll be talking about the offensive capabilities of our allies, some strategies that they may or may not use, and it's assumed that they will have similar limits to the game and also their universe. So it'll be a squad of these troops stuck in an area with a large number of Zeds. One important thing that kind of determines a lot of the survivability is what the resupply situation is, and, much as in the game, they will be allowed periodical resupply. Not constant resupply, not infinite resupply, but periodical. Every couple of waves, essentially, they will get a drop-in. So, let's look at our low-tier Zeds. We have the Clot, we have the Cyst, we have the Alpha Clot, and we have the Rioter. Now, I'm just going to go over them real quick. The Clot is your basic guy. Basically, they're referred to by a couple of nicknames, Mistakes, Rejects, and Soccer Fans. Especially the Rioter is just kind of like an angry chaos brute, but they are not really any more threatening than a normal human being. They're a little bit more insane. One of the big things about the Zeds is that they're basically fearless. They don't really run away from much. And problem, they're not very intelligent either. So their main tactics for all these guys is mass assault. The Alpha Clot and the Rioter can both kind of enrage and sprint at you, and they can buff up other units. And then the Rioters are the only ones on this group that have body armor, but their body armor is not great. Now, the initial question is obviously going to be, well, all of these troops are very good against unarmored infantry, and none of these guys have firearms, so what's the deal? The main thing is kind of the nature of the Zeds. Zeds are, again, biologically engineered super soldiers. You can consider them like a base-level Captain America, minus any intelligence and any actual protection or weapons. They are designed to be remarkably tough. The only ones here that are kind of failures off the bat are the cysts. The cysts are genuinely just kind of unfinished. They're a lot weaker. They're arguably even a little bit weaker than normal humans, and they attack by grabbing and biting, much like the rest of them do, except they are, again, slower, less intelligent, and less physically powerful. The Clot and the Alpha Clot are definitely more on par with an angry human, while the Rioter has that little bit of extra supernatural juice in them that makes them both tougher and more dangerous. So, who is going to survive this level of the killing floor with the low tier boys? I would say, let's start with the Guardsmen. So this is the Lasgun's perfect enemy, and I mean that genuinely. The Lasgun is practically custom built to knock down lots of unarmored or low armored enemies, and unlike firearms, which they might be able to tank through having genetic modifications to their bodies and also theoretically some modifications to their internal organs, the Lasgun is perfectly placed to do massive physical damage, which will likely knock them out quite quickly. Especially to limbs and to the head, Lasgun shots are going to be an instant takedown, either a kill or at least a cripple. With 2 shots to the body, you can guarantee yourself a kill, which is much better than you would expect from a rifle against Zeds generally. The main problem with the Guardsmen is needing to save ammunition, especially against the Rioter, because that will take a little burst of shots. So what I'd recommend for the Guardsmen is that they essentially stick together and work in a roving pack. Because each of them can easily take down at least 2 to 5 Zeds in a very short period of time, we're talking a couple of seconds, that means that they're able to clear out large areas very rapidly and kind of go on the offensive to secure more areas within our map. So the Guardsman is pretty good. The only thing he would have to worry about is the Rioter, and the Rioter's legs and arms are not armored, so just aim low and you'll be able to cripple them fairly quickly with a lasgun. That's completely discounting that our squad is likely going to have a heavy weapon at hand. The Helldivers. Again, much like with the lasgun, there is a particular weapon that will shine here, and that is any and all submachine guns. They don't have to penetrate armor, but of course some of them that do penetrate armor would be nice against the Rioter. But even without that, the high fire rate and the rapid impacts are going to overwhelm a vast majority of these low tier Zeds and truly ruin their day. The other advantage that the Helldiver has is that they can maximize the value of high explosive weapons. Grenades, grenade launchers, theoretically artillery, though I think that would be heavily limited in a killing floor setting. All of these will have massive dividends against these low tier Zeds that are quite vulnerable, especially to high explosive and to rapid impacts like you would get from SMGs. With the Helldivers, they have a little bit of an advantage over the others in that they can call in orbital resupply, where the Guardsmen might just get like a dropped off crate of supplies and ammunition. The Clones and the Space Marines might just get a couple of extra things dropped in with reinforcements. The Helldiver will likely be able to fully restock from the periodical ammunition that he receives, because, well, he's designed for that long-distance engagement in the field, and he is designed to be fully reimbursed in the field, as opposed to most of the other forces involved. Now, clones. Again, this is kind of the first time that we've gone into using clone troopers in this kind of video, so I'm going to go through it again, just like this is a squad of 10, Helldivers are a squad of 4, Guardsmen is a squad of 10, Space Marines is a squad of 5, Modern Soldiers and Halo Marines are also in squads of 10. So, the clone squad of 10 has one particular problem. Their uniform firepower and overkill on their primary armament kind of combined to create a bit of an issue. Against all of these except for the Rioter, the standard rifles of the clones is overkill. It will insta-kill them basically no matter where it hits them. That may sound like a good thing, but the clones are far more sharply limited in the ammunition supplies that they have, generally, than a lot of other ones. For example, lasguns will definitely have more ammunition and resupply than clone rifles will. Particularly depending upon the version, for example. A lot of the shorter clone rifles or carbines may have many shots, but it will depend upon how big or how often they take those shots, whereas the rifles have less ammunition overall, and the pistols have very little ammunition. So, the clone's primary armament is overkill, and even against the Rioter, 1 to 2 shots is an instantaneous kill, while one shot, it could easily kill 2 of the standard cyst or clot due to basically overpenetration and extra damage. This is good. But again, the ammunition here is going to be a problem, as wasting ammo on these low tier Zeds is going to eat up ammunition that the clones will want to save for other types of enemies. The other advantage that the clone has, and I kind of attribute to this to the Guardsman and the Helldiver, but it is particularly important with the clone has fully encased armor, which is very important against Zeds because they have a big proclivity to grab and try and bite at you. And having that fully covered, fully protective armor, in the case of the clone, it's like a laminated plastic, that's a big advantage. The Helldiver has something very similar, but it is less uniform. There is Helldiver armor like light armor that isn't necessarily as good at protecting you from that kind of attack, while the Guardsman armor is, again, assumed to be standard flak, which doesn't really cover the arms and legs that much, so the clone is definitely winning out in having more uniform armor that can protect him from standard Zed attacks. For the Space Marine, there's really no need to use their primary weapons whatsoever. I would say probably shoot the Rioters with a single bolt shell to the chest. It will shred their makeshift armor and kill them instantly. So against every single other one, close combat weapons, I mean, really, you just need the Astartes combat knife. That would really do the job against any of these guys. Even if you didn't have that, if you were just a normal Space Marine or a squad of Space Marine of 5 with just bolt pistols and knives or just bolt guns, you could basically rip apart most of these Zeds with your bare hands or punch them to death. So it's really not really a threat. There's almost none of these that could truly pose a threat to a Marine, and it would take several thousand, much more than we usually see in the killing floor, to overwhelm a squad of 5, especially if they had their primary weapons. So the Marine is practically in no danger here. Modern soldiers, 1990s and Halo Marines, the biggest thing is saving ammunition. That's a paramount. Because the 1990s and the Halo Marines are both going to get resupplied from the air, and their ammunition takes significantly longer to load and to unload from its containers than either the Helldiver, the Guardsman, or the clone, the Space Marine, again, basically doesn't need to use ammunition, so it's not a worry for this, but it is a worry for the modern soldier. They need to reload more magazines, they need to transfer ammunition from crates and canisters and containers into their weapons. In the case of Halo Marines, they have like plastic sleeves of ammunition, which, while theoretically better for transit, also make it very difficult to actually get them out and start using them. So what would be best for these soldiers is to select a defensive location to hold out in for both of them. So the Halo Marine would benefit from putting their back to the wall and finding a defensive location to hold out in. The 1990s modern soldier would be very, very much advantaged by finding a wall to put their back against and then piling up some sandbags and holding out in that way. Both of them have the ability to knock out every single type of Zed on this list very easily with 2 to 5 shots. Again, Zeds are pretty tough against bullets. They are intended to be resilient super soldiers after all, and they can take a bit of a pounding, especially the Rioter. That can tank multiple rounds of 308, basically more than half a magazine to the chest, and not really die, not all the time at least. So modern soldiers, you're no longer taking single strategic shots to the arms and legs like the lasgun is able to, or bursting down with an SMG. No, now you're having to do nice, tight 3 or 4 round groups into the chest of everyone, and then dropping half a magazine on a Rioter every now and then. So it's a little bit more ammunition consumptive for them, so saving their ammunition is more important. For these guys, I think obvious win goes to the Space Marines in terms of who's going to hold out the longest. No matter how many of these you throw at the Marines, there's a very high chance that they will simply overcome them. All right, Skirmisher Zeds, the next boys up, the Fasty boys. We have the Gorefast and the Gorefiend, the Stalker, the Slasher, and the Crawler. For nicknames, normal is we got the Gorefast and Gorefiend are just Knife Man and Double Knife Man. Stalker is Invisibitch. Cokehead for the Slasher, because if you've played the game, you know exactly why their name is Cokehead. And then the Crawlers are Spider-Man. Yeah, pretty much that. So, their tactics, pretty much universally, are speedy harassment and overwhelming attacks. Outside of the Gorefasts and the Gorefiends, their attacks are not particularly dangerous. All of these guys just make them quickly. The Slasher likes to grab you, the Stalker is invisible and can do flips and kick you with its long nails and rake at you, the Crawler can also flip and grab and stab at you, but the Gorefast and the Gorefiend have basically a massive Uruk-hai blade stuck into their arm, and that is a very lethal weapon that could easily break through or split areas of body armor, so it is definitely more of a threat to everyone on this list than the Stalker, Slasher, and Crawler. The Guardsmen, they have a bit more of a problem here. Kinetic lethality is the big issue. Against most of these folks, they're not going to have an issue. The Slasher, the Crawler, and arguably even the Stalker, for a reason that we're going to talk about in a bit, they can be taken down fast and easy. The Stalker and the Slasher and the Crawler are both physically on the same toughness level as a Clot or a Cyst, so it's not too hard to take them out with lasguns. The problem comes with the Gorefast and the Gorefiend. The Gorefast and the Gorefiend are as tough as the Rioter. Granted, they don't have any armor, but they are relatively tough. They're covered in thick layers of muscle. They definitely are more resistant to pain and to physical damage. The lasgun is, again, going to need to dump 10 to 15 rounds into them if you want to hit them just in the chest and head in order to really put them down. What is also a problem is the Fast and Fiend are runners, and their kinetic weapons are very much capable of killing a guardsman if they get a good swing in, and they are quite good at sprinting at you and trying to give their lives in order to hack you to pieces. So the guardsman is going to struggle against the Gorefast and the Gorefiend, but theoretically not against any of the others. Now, when it comes to the invisibility of the Stalker, we know that there are ways around it. Specifically in-game, there are certain classes that could just straight up see the Stalker as if their invisibility didn't exist. And I think that this has to do a little bit with things like heartbeat sensors or any general infrared or monitoring equipment. Now, do I think that the average guard squad has access to this? Yes, actually. I think that a majority of guard squads, up to a regular standard, will have the ability to use an Auspex scanner. Auspex scanners come with all different types of modes and forms. Does this actually give them the ability to outright see the Stalker? No, but it gives them the ability to see them coming, and since they don't have to worry about ammunition as much due to the fact that they have lasguns, fanning a quick fully automatic burst across a hallway will basically guarantee that you're going to hit the Stalker, as they are not very smart, and they won't really kind of crawl along the floor or anything to try and get at you that way. So they have kind of a semi-invisibility counter for the Stalker, so I say that they can defeat 3 out of 5 of the skirmishers very easily. For the Helldiver, you're kind of going to have to stick with 2 different types of weapons. Either high rate of fire guns and shotguns, to take out the Gorefast and the Gorefiend quickly, but the big problem is you can't rely on your armor anymore. You could rely on your armor more so for the under-level Zeds if you were wearing heavier Helldivers gear, but you can't rely on it anymore. Most of these enemies are based around hooking and grabbing or swinging with big blades, and these can all overcome your armor far more easily than those low-tier Zeds just grabbing you and biting at you. So best option, face them head on with the more high rate of fire guns and with shotguns to put down fiends and fasts in a hurry. I don't think that Helldivers have an efficient way of dealing with Stalkers, so that is going to be a problem. And while I think that they could deal with most of the folks on this list, I think that the Stalker is going to be their biggest opponent. Clones, now again, finally a good reason to have those plasma rifles. That's a basic standard weapon that everyone has, and it will put down the fiends and fasts quick, fast, and in a hurry. That will not be a problem for the clones. They are able to deal with them very quickly due to the fact that their primary weapons are basically going to put them down in 1 to 2 shots, maybe 4 or 5 for the fasts because they are for the fiends because they are a little bit tougher. And I do also think that if I'm going to extend the Auspex justification to the Guardsmen, I can expend the HUD justification to the clones. So I think that the clones would also be able to deal with the Stalkers very easily. When it comes to the Slasher and the Crawler, again, I don't think it's going to be a problem, but it will, again, be a waste of ammunition for the most part, and the fact that the clones don't have a bayonet to fall back on or some other type of close combat weapon, they're going to be expending a lot of ammunition on enemies that are, yes, dangerous, but not necessarily as worthy of the plasma bolts as something like a Fiend, a Fast, or a Stalker. So, not bad. They can kind of deal with most things, but still they have the disadvantage that basically 2 or 3 out of the things on this list are a waste of ammunition for them to fight against, and they have no alternative. For the Space Marines, inbuilt HUD completely removes the invisibility advantage. The Stalker is going to be completely visible to the Marine, so they're not a threat at all. Marine has the advantage of physical strength and the bolt gun for fasts and fiends, so that's not going to be a problem. The one thing that I see possibly being a problem is the aggressiveness of crawlers and slashers. As opposed to the other units, which have those more expendable weapons that they can use on slashers or on crawlers, and also theoretically backup melee weapons on their weapons, like bayonets for the guardsmen, the Space Marine does not. And while I'm not saying that that's a weakness, I am saying that the combat blade alone is short and not really capable of killing multiple enemies at the same time. Unlike, theoretically, you have a bayonet and then you have the weapon itself, can fire and then bayonet on the target. I think that the only concern I would have as a Marine would be the crawlers or the slashers sneaking up on you and grabbing a hold of you. Can they actually hold on to you and kind of keep your attention like in the game? No, obviously, it's a Space Marine, but they could grab onto you, interfere with your movement, and multiple of them could attempt to break into your armor. Do I think that they would be successful? No. But do I think that it's a theoretical danger when other enemies come around? Yes. So, the Modern Soldier in the 1990s and the Halo Marine. It is best for almost all of these units to focus fire or to use emplaced weapons. Working in pairs and not being mobile is another great option. Now for the emplaced weapons, it's mostly to take down the fiends and fast quickly, but it's also to suppress a lot of these enemies. You can suppress the slasher, stalker, and crawler, as opposed to the fast and fiend. So using a basic emplaced weapon or focus fire to kind of gun down a hallway in your defensive area will allow you to break up the horde of skirmishers quite quickly. Some of them will back off, some of them will jump away, some of them will run away, and then the fasts and fiends will run right at you, giving you an opportunity to take them down effectively. If you have to move, say to go get resupply, work in pairs. You don't want a slasher or stalker or even a crawler grabbing one of you guys while you're trying to get more ammunition and then hauling them away or taking them down while other Zeds eat them alive. So work in pairs or preferably move as a squad, kind of the way that I said the Helldivers could on the offensive. But like I said, you should stay to the defensive unless you need to move to get resupply of ammunition. Of this group, I think the best survivor here is probably the Helldiver. They have the combination of very lethal weapons and also some pretty effective autonomous systems that could effectively cancel out many of the Stalker's advantages. The Clone would honestly be an even pick with me. I think that this is a great situation for the Clone. They have no matchups in here that they have a severe disadvantage against, and there's no secret theoretical disadvantages like there are with the Space Marine. So overall, I think the Clone comes in first with this one, with the Helldivers being a tight second. The technical Zeds, Husks, Sirens, Edars, and Bloats. Nicknames, the Husk is the TF2 Pyro, obviously. The Siren is the Heavy Metal Bitch, also referred to as the HMB. Edars, of course, are dirty, filthy clankers. And then the Bloats are just often referred to as Chub, because he Chub. So, the tactics, quote-unquote, for these folks are limited armor. Now, it ranges. Obviously, the Bloat is not armored, but it is fat, and that makes it durable, so technical armor. The Siren, despite how she looks and how anemic she is actually armored pretty heavily in certain areas. The Husk is also armored, again, that steel covering over their chest and such. And then the Edars are all armored with a weak spot in their head and in their belly. All of these folks have hybrid damage. Essentially, they can combine ranged and melee damage of different types, and they have a particular range of debuffs. The Husk obviously can light you on fire, he can spray fire, he can shoot little fire bolts, and then he can also explode himself because he has a flamethrower. The Siren can scream. This scream is kind of an EMP, but not really. More accurately, it's a sonic weapon that can destroy small explosives like hand grenades and other thrown objects of that nature. This can be a problem for a lot of folks, as we're going to talk about, but I don't think... We'll talk about it when we get to the Space Marine. The Edar has missiles and a Tesla coil and lasers, all different types of good stuff. None of it is particularly armor cracking, but some of it is quite damaging, especially the rockets. And then the bloats vomit acid, which distracts and deals damage over time. So, who is surviving this level of the killing floor? I think that the Guardsman has run into the first real problem here. Now, it's not a killer problem, but it is a problem. The enemy armor and toughness is going to start becoming an issue. Whatever our squad is equipped with, be it an autocannon or a heavy bolter or a medium stubber, whatever heavy support weapon we have in the squad, and of course whatever officerial or special weapons we have in the squad, again, I didn't outline it for a reason. You can essentially input whatever you'd like to make whatever argument you'd like, but for whatever reason or whatever option we choose, that is now going to become our primary way to deal with these enemies. There are less of them, but there are still plenty of them in every wave that our medium and heavy weapons are going to have to focus on these guys. When a bloat appears, or an EDAR, or a siren, or a husk, our snipers or long lasmen or hotshot las gunners are going to have to focus on them. They can't waver focus to try and hit lighter enemies. When they come across them in large groups, they're going to be overwhelmed. If they have to reload, we're going to be in a problem, because the standard lasgun is going to struggle with most of these enemies. The siren and the husk are both partially armored, but more importantly, they're just very, very tough. And of course, the thing is, we can't really throw grenades at them or anything. There is obviously the concern about, like, can grenade launchers be destroyed by the siren scream? I'm pretty sure they cannot, though I think it also depends on how big and how slow the explosive actually is. So that might be a problem, but as long as we're using something like a heavy bolter and not, like, thrown fragmentation grenades, we shouldn't have an issue with it. The best possible option for the Guardsmen is to stay at long range and to keep whatever medium support weapon they have available well fed and well resupplied. In my opinion, the best option would be a heavy bolter, because it makes all of these enemies basically into scrap in a very short period of time, and it can be reloaded very quickly in comparison to something like certain autocannons, for example. Now, the Helldiver is next. They have to rely upon fast-firing medium armor penetration guns. That sounds bad until you realize that there's actually quite a few of those in the Helldiver's arsenal. I mean, you have the Adjudicator, Liberator Penetrator, you now have the MA5C technically, yeah, I know, and then you also have various other medium and high penetration primary weapons. This doesn't mean that they're all going to have those. At least two will likely have a medium penetration weapon because, well, this is a bot mission, so to speak, again, with them being EDARs and such. So I think the Helldiver kind of has it. They don't have to rely on a heavy weapon just yet like the Guardsmen do, and they don't really have a bad matchup in this group. They don't rely on grenades that much. Plenty of them are resistant or durable against fire. All of them are used to fighting bots, so the EDARs are not really a problem. And then the bloats are basically a worse version of like a Brood Commander bug, so not a problem whatsoever for the Helldiver. The clone, you want to obtain cover of some kind. Unlike the Guardsman and the Helldiver, you are less armored against a lot of things that are being used here. The rockets, the lasers, the electricity, even the acid, the fire, and the sonic, theoretically, the Guardsmen and the Helldivers are going to be better protected against because of their armor protection than the clone is. The clone is fine against getting, maybe a couple of stabs and bites and scratches against missiles and lasers, electricity, and fire. The Guardsmen and the Helldiver are both in a better situation. So you also want to start to follow the same organization that I have for the 1990s and the Halo Marines. Find defensive positions with long sight lines to maximize your slower rate of fire. Why? Well, this is the first enemy that your slower rate of fire, your semi-automatic or burst fire, is going to be a problem, because these guys can tank shots. The Husk and the Siren are not as bad for this, but the EDAR and the Bloat can sometimes take insane amounts of punishment to really go down. I think it's arguable that a EDAR could have similar durability to like a B2 Super Battle Droid, which means that they can take several rifle shots to the chest and basically resist it and continue fighting. So the clone is coming up against the first limitations of their war gear, but we'll talk about what to do about that next slide. For the Space Marine, for our squad of 5, the first actual danger to the squad is found here. The missiles, the electric weapons that the Edar have, the sonic weapons that the Siren has, and the acid weapons, of course, that the Bloat is carrying around. All of those are now an actual danger to the Marine. Fire is not a super deadly thing against Space Marines. I do think that setting them on fire is an effective way to destroy them, but the Husk is not really as incendiary as like an actual flamethrower unless they come up close. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem fire-wise, but the Sonic will be. The Sonic can definitely damage the Marine's armor and possibly even cause damage through it, which makes them one of the most dangerous enemies that the Marines will have to fight. The electricity, the like zappy beam from the Edars, is going to mess with the systems. It could theoretically paralyze the Marine, which is going to be a really bad problem. The lasers for the Edars are not going to be an issue, but the missiles will be. The missiles are small. They're like 30 to 40 millimeter high explosive rockets, but they're fired in volleys, and with multiple sets of Edars, these can actually empty out a ton of punishment on a single area. You could consider them equal to maybe a small fragmentation grenade or a modern fragmentation grenade, and 8 to 10 of those hitting a Marine in very short succession is going to cause significant damage to the armor, it's going to disorient them, and it could theoretically cause chip damage over time. So definitely you want to go full-on Bolter for the win. Against all of these enemies, the Bolter will be effective. The Edar, it will definitely penetrate the armor. It will take down Husks and Sirens in 1 to 3 shots. Bloats, probably 2 shots. But Edars, I think, at least 1, maybe 2 if you hit like a limb first or the head first. So the Bolter is definitely coming out here. We're no longer using just our melee weapons, so focusing upon that. So it is the first threat that the Space Marine comes up against, so it is going to be the first like issue that they run into on the killing floor. For the Modern Soldier in the 1990s and the Halo Marine, these enemies need to be put down quickly and hard. You need to have heavy firepower to remove them from the enemy battle line before they get an opportunity to destroy your in-place defensive position. Focusing fire and remaining with an in-placed weapon is the best option. My suggestion is heavy machine guns. This is not an enemy that a light machine gun or a squad automatic is going to deal with very quickly, and it needs to be dealt with quickly. A 50 cal, a mounted 50 cal, a 40 Mike grenade launcher, any type of weapon like that, anything similar to that, honestly, or even an anti-materiel rifle like a 50 cal or a Notwell like 20 millimeter are going to be more acceptable. For the Marines, specifically for the Halo Marines, because their high explosive grenades, their fragmentation grenades are both so common and relatively effective, they're going to want to use those basically immediately. They will completely disorient or destroy the Bloats, they will mess up the Edars, and they will usually kill the Husks. The only problem, again, comes in with the Siren. I do not think the Siren can destroy bolt rounds or fast launch grenades, but thrown grenades it can absolutely destroy. So the idea is essentially any other enemy except for the Siren, the Halo Marines will want to huck high explosive grenades as quickly as possible. For this floor, I really do think that the winner is the Helldiver. So overall, I think they have the most versatility in their primary armament, they'll have the most ammunition to take these threats down, and they will have the most variability through which to deal with them. The fact that there's only 4 of them, however, is going to come up in our next slide. Limited numbers is going to be the problem here with our Elite Zeds. Now, the Elite Zeds are 3. We have the Quarter Pounder up here, the Flesh Pound down here, and the Scrake. Refer to them as colloquially burger meat with the Quarter Pounders, built Ford Tough with the Flesh Pound, and then either Tall, Dark, and Handsome for the Scrake or Leatherface for the Scrake, both of which work. Now, these are elite pack or elite monster units meant to mulch enemy infantry while resisting or ignoring enemy attacks with quote-unquote armor. Now, while the Quarter Pounder and the Flesh Pound do have actual armor, there is steel built into their skeleton that heavily reinforces them and protects their internal organs, the Scrake is just too goddamn tough to die. It is incredibly angry and really doesn't like to go down. It can tank full-on rocket-propelled grenade hits to the face and not die every single time. Same thing with the Flesh Pound. At this point, we've gone beyond normal human limits of durability or stupid little tacked-on armor to creatures that do not obey the laws of being alive and being dead. True super soldier weapons meant to overmatch all other enemy infantry. For the Guardsmen, this requires extreme focus fire, including heavy and medium weapons. It would be best here to have some high damage weapon, like a melt-a-gun, or possibly even something expensive like a rocket or missile launcher, and then use crack grenades is my other great example. All of these enemies have large, expansive areas of metal, and the crack grenade, being a magnetic-shaped charge weapon, is going to be a great option for this. Even with all the disadvantages that the Guardsmen have in this scenario, they have two minor advantages that really let them deal with these guys. One of them is crack grenades. The fact that they have a magnetic, anti-armor, heavy concussive directed projectile, an EFP grenade, means that they can pretty easily stagger, stumble, or outright kill these guys with only 1 to 2 uses of the grenade. And the magnet's pretty strong. It will lock on probably 50% of the time, so all you have to do is throw 2 or 3 grenades. There's not as many Quarter Pounders, Flesh Pounds, and Skrakes as there are other enemies in every wave, so as long as you resupply up on crack grenades, you shouldn't have an issue dousing 2 or 3 of them every single time there's a round with them in it. The other side of it is that they will have those specialized weapons. They will have, the officer's bolt pistol, they will have the 2 guys with either hell guns or long lasers or plasma weapons, and then they will have an actual designated heavy weapon. Now, with the Quarter Pounders, las guns will do the job, it will just take too long. 2 or 3 full magazines focusing firing on them would likely take out a single Quarter Pounder. However, there's usually squads of 4 to 6 Quarter Pounders at a time. So again, my recommendation for them would be heavy bolters, or theoretically light or medium machine guns. For the bigger guys, however, I would say missile, rocket launcher, or high caliber autocannons. A 35mm autocannon is going to put down a Scrake pretty quickly. It's going to enrage the Flesh Pound, so the big problem is keeping out of the way of the Flesh Pound, and that's mainly going to be done via range. What I'd recommend combination-wise is essentially you toss a couple crack grenades, and then once it's staggered or knocked over, you open up with whatever heavy weapons you have and burst down the Flesh Pound. Considering that you practically have to disassemble the damn thing, yeah, you definitely want to combo plate hit it, because it is going to be the most dangerous enemy that you face, short of our next slide. So the Guardsman's in a pretty good place. The Helldiver, on the other hand, is not. Your primary weapons are no longer of any use against these enemies whatsoever. Your standard infantry weapons, even ones that are armor-piercing, simply do not have the sheer amount of damage required to get through the meat on these enemies. You might take down Quarter Pounders, with relative ease, similar to how the Guardsmen would have to empty their magazines with their las guns, but for everything else, you're going to have to pull out the heavy AT. Now, here's the problem. Most of the AT for the Helldiver is based in explosives. Some of these enemies, specifically the Scrake, is remarkably tough against explosives. For the Flesh Pound and the Quarter Pounders, things like the recoilless rifle or even some of the laser weapons are going to be very effective. 2 or 3 shots with your AT weapons are going to do the job. Or, theoretically, if you have the access to it, again, assuming killing floor rules, orbital weapons or orbital artillery, I would even say a rail cannon strike, wouldn't be a terrible option. The problem comes with the Scrake. This is going to be your nightmare. It is fast, it is angry, it is aggressive once roused, and it is resistant to explosives. Very resistant to explosives. Quite tough against many different types of weapons. If even an RPG doesn't take this thing down, a recoilless hit might not kill it in one shot. So, again, 2 or 3 shots, or focus firing with multiple AT weapons, but at that point, it's already charging you, so you're going to have to deal with it at close range. On to the clones. This is going to be a problem for them, and it's going to require some special add-ins. This is where the difficulty arises with these enemies. They are both armored, but also tough. So focusing fire is acceptable, it'll do the job again with the quarter pounders, but a special weapon or retreat may be the best option for these enemies with the clones. I think they're going to struggle most with the flesh pound. The quarter pounders, again, I think with focus fire they could take them out. And the Scrake, if they had a special weapon, for example, a shock laser, a laser minigun, maybe even one of their rocket launchers or tube launchers, they could take out the Scrake with combined effort. What they will have a harder time with is the Flesh Pound. My reasoning is that the Flesh Pound is usually far more aggressive for far longer. The Scrake will get angry once it gets hit and survives. The Flesh Pound can enrage itself. It can actively start running and grinding at you, and that might not give the clones enough time to spool up the heavy weapon or to use their main primary weapon, so I think it would be a serious issue for them trying to deal with one or even multiple Flesh Pounds. So the clones may have to disengage or retreat, which is going to put them on the back foot and could possibly lead to them getting knocked off the killing floor entirely. This is the first group that I think there's a legitimate chance that a couple of Flesh Pounds is going to knock them off the floor, unlike basically everyone else in this engagement. The Marines have another really hard time here. This is an extant threat. All of these enemies have a chance to knock out the Marine, like a legitimate chance. The Scrake can grab them and hack off limbs. The Flesh Pound can literally crush them and rip them apart because they are similar in size, but the Flesh Pound is far more physically powerful. Again, physically powerful in terms of like throwing its weight behind stuff. It's not actually stronger necessarily. The quarter pounders, I think they could still beat them to death with melee weapons, but for all of these, just empty the bolter's magazine. Genuinely, 30 rounds from the bolt gun from a couple of Marines is going to down the Flesh Pound. It is likely going to incapacitate or down the Scrake as well, and it will cut through the majority of the quarter pounders, leaving the rest of them free for you to deal with at closer range. So this is the first chance that I think there are for the Zeds to really take down a couple of these Marines at a time, especially because the Marines are not going to hold a defensive position. They are going to go on the offensive. They're going to go towards the heart of the infection of the infestation, which means that these forces will be combined with other ones, and of course, if the Marines are already at half of their magazine capacity or low on ammunition, they're going to have to engage a Flesh Pound or a Scrake in fisticuffs, and that's not a great idea. That's a really easy way to get wounded or killed by one of these huge superhuman monstrosities. So definitely not a great matchup for them, but again, I think the biggest threat is going to come from the Scrake and the Flesh Pound, while the quarter pounders are not going to be as much of a problem. Now, for the modern soldier, this is extreme danger territory, as you might expect. Most of these enemies are practically bulletproof, or your bullets aren't going to do much to them. They are too tough to be human, and your best option is to just stay at a distance, like really far away. Whenever you see them, start moving. Toss whatever grenades you have behind you, use whatever heavy weapons you have at your disposal, but if you have to abandon them, you might have to abandon them. One of the things that I think that the human or modern soldiers, including the Halo Marines, would do well against is the quarter pounder. Not necessarily because they are particularly good at it, but it's more due to the fact that they have the explosives and the capability to bring those heavy, high velocity or high rate of fire weapons that can burst down squads of quarter pounders. Those are considerably less useful against the Flesh Pound and Scrake, which will then enrage and go after them. I think the only folks that could likely get knocked off of the field in this are probably the clones or the modern soldiers. Either of them could end up on the back foot when confronted with multiple Flesh Pounds or Scrakes, and then possibly get killed out entirely in one single round. The winner here, weirdly enough, I believe would be the Guardsman. The Guardsman has a weapon that is practically custom built to kill all of these enemies off relatively easily. They have an ability with their focus fire that helps them out more than most others because their enemies don't have any physical armor in this case. Their armor is in the internal. And then finally, they have a lot more variety of weapons, giving them access to more ways and more mobile ways by which to deal with these enemies. The runner-up would probably be the Marines, but again, they have much more vulnerability here than they would normally. So I think the winner is the Guardsman. The only two quote-unquote losers, or the only two folks I could see getting killed off the killing floor, would be the clones and the modern soldiers and the Marines. Moving on to our last one, onto our bosses for Killing Floor 2. We have the Patriarch and the Matriarch. We have Dr. Hitler, also known as Hans Volter. We have the A-Bomb, also known as Your Mother, and we have the King Fleshpound, colloquially referred to as Big Randy. You can ask why to whoever you would like. I'm not telling you. These guys are insanely durable. Inhumanly, they will often have shields. They will often have abilities to regenerate health by devouring the living. And they have immense physical size. They are far larger than their normal counterparts, and they are insanely powerful, many of them having guns, missiles, rockets, and of course, shielding to protect themselves from shots. So, final check-in. Would you survive the killing floor? Guardsmen, extreme danger. Your best matchup in this is against the Patriarch or the Abomination. Those are the two that rely the least on shields and armor, and rely more upon meat points to actually remain defensive. Now, the Patriarch has missiles and he has a minigun. He also has the ability to turn invisible, but like we talked about, I am pretty sure that the Guardsman will be able to get around this. He's a huge target, far more easy to spot than the average Stalker. So, with that, and the fact that the A-Bomb is basically just a really fat, armored version of the Bloat, I think that the Guardsmen could deal with them. Again, it is an extreme danger. They are definitely able to insta-kill you very quickly, but if you keep on the move, or if you find a very, very good defensive position, you can burst them down without too much difficulty, and in my opinion, the others are simply far more of a death sentence for that squad. The Helldivers are in high danger, but this is not something that they lose against every day. This is enemies that they come across pretty regularly in terms of physical size and capability, if they're a little bit faster, a little bit smarter, and have a little bit more in terms of ranged weapons. The Helldivers' best matchup is against the King Fleshpound using their heavy weapons or artillery or anti-tank. The King Fleshpound is just a bigger, more dangerous Fleshpound with a chest laser. So the Helldiver is really just fighting against a Fleshpound. And the Fleshpound, like I said, is not as invulnerable to explosive weapons as the Scrake is. So, Helldivers have lots of weapons that can deal with them. Plenty of explosive weapons, plenty of anti-tank weapons, theoretically turrets and other things like that that can be used to distract it. However, like with the previous slide, I think this is where the problem of them having a lower squad count in the 4s or 5s rather than the 10s available to others. All of these bosses are going to take a couple of squad members with them, no matter what. So the Helldivers have more to lose, and if it comes down to the last guy and he has to take out the Fleshpound, well, you just better hope he has an actual functional anti-tank weapon, and of course has ammunition for it. I would also add that things like thermite grenades and the ultimatum would be a very effective way to slow down the King Fleshpound. Clones. Extreme danger. They are in a very similar boat to the Guardsmen, but their best matchup is against the Matriarch, specifically because she relies upon Edar spam and upon her physical armor more than a shield. Now, with that said, the clones are going to be best. They can take out the Edars the same way that they can take out B2 battle droids. Is it hard? Yes, but in comparison to many of the other enemies, like the ones that are getting spawned by the A-Bomb, or just the sheer focusing of the Fleshpound or the gas of Hans Volter, the clones have the best matchup against her. Their primary weapons can still damage her pretty effectively, and then their heavy weapons are just going to be cherry on top of that. So they're going to cost a couple of men, but they will get the job done. The Space Marines. Finally, they reach a real challenge, and a pretty much guarantee that at least one of them is going to go down before this fight is over. Their challenge essentially is going to be having to open up with bolters, and those are not going to be enough against all of these guys, except for Hans Volter. Hans is their best matchup because he's not all that physically imposing. He just has the thickest shields of the bunch, and his poison gas and his primary weapons, his machine guns, are going to be the least damaging to the Marines. They're not super heavy, massive melee weapons, or big high-capacity weapons like the Patriarch's missiles and Gatling gun. So their best option is against Hans. He does have the shields, but they can chew through those with bolters and then likely tear him apart pretty easily. I do think that he's going to kill at least one, likely because of the fact that he's incredibly fast and his long armor penetrating like nails, his kind of neon nails, can allow him to basically shove them into a Marine's eyes or throat, killing one of them instantly. But with that said, I think that he's still their best matchup. The modern soldier, or the 1990s and the Halo Marines, this is almost an impossible fight against all of these enemies, really. The best option is the Abomination, but that is really hard. The A-Bomb is tough, it spawns acidic enemies. My theoretical option was maybe the King Fleshpound. Neither of them have effective ranged weapons, and the enemies that they spawn are easier to deal with. So I think that those are their best matchups, but they're going to rely on every single piece of extra man-portable anti-tank that they have, every grenade, basically every magazine, especially for the A-Bomb, and they may still just not have the juice required to put down those high-health enemies. I think that they would lose against Volter because he simply has more firepower and, of course, poisonous gas compared to them. They lose against the Patriarch because they have no way of seeing where he is, and every time he reappears, he's going to kill one of them. And they lose against the Matriarch for basically the same reason, plus she has much better armor. So overall, I think that the best survivors of the killing floor would be as follows. The number one, the winner, so to speak, would be the Space Marines. The number two is a toss-up between the Guardsmen and the Clones. Clones have a lot of different things that they can deal with. They have a little bit easier in terms of logistics in comparison to certain other troops, but the solid third is the Helldiver with the 1990 Soldier and the Halo Marine. I know there's going to be disagreements with that. That's fine. You can place them however you'd like. It kind of matters what you put emphasis on. And for me, I think that the bosses are kind of the biggest stop for a majority of these guys. And the only options that they have easy for these folks, or the only option that has the easiest time or has the ability to kill all of them, is really the Space Marine. It's not easy, but they have the ability to kill all of them. So, I hope that you guys enjoyed. Naturally, our credit goes to Tripwire, to Big Green Pepper, and to Mini Spartan 300. I am not really, I wasn't really planning on doing a lot of killing floor stuff on the channel, as I wasn't sure how much people are interested in it, but given the new game was coming out, and also given the fact that, well, I've always wanted to do a who would win the killing floor, I think that it's a good time to do this video. Let me know if you agree with me. Let me know if you disagree with my takes. I certainly am open to interpretation, as this is, of course, putting different fictions into different game scenarios. And, of course, there is the whole logistical situation to consider. What if we were looking at a completely different situation where it was an open field battle rather than a security breach? You know, all those things are definitely to be taken into account, but either in any way, I'll be sending up a list of incoming videos and an opportunity for you guys to put in your thoughts and ideas very soon on the post channel. It's going to be maybe a week, maybe a little bit longer before we are able to get another video in. I was happy to get these two in, but like I said, we are slowing down just a little bit. So I'll be doing what I can to maybe get a stream out, maybe get something else out. That will just all be determinate, and you will have to keep up with me in the post channel. Either and any way, I'm so glad I could make this for you, and I wish you all a lovely good night.